You step on your dog's tail. It's an accident. He yelps, bolts to the other room, and you feel terrible about it for exactly as long as it takes to put the kettle on. An hour later, he's back, head on your knee, looking up at you like nothing happened. You scratch his ears and you call it forgiveness, because that's the word we have, and then you forget about it completely. But something did happen in that hour. Alone in the other room, your dog did something with what you did to him, and whatever that something was, it ended with him choosing to come back. So here's the question. Was that forgiveness, or did he just forget? And if there's a difference, would you even be able to tell? Because we treat forgiveness as one of the most human things there is, something you choose, something that takes character. But what if it was never really ours to begin with? For a long time, science had a comfortable answer to that. Animals don't forgive. There's nothing in there to forgive with. After a fight, the thinking went, they simply avoid each other, because that is what aggression is for, to push them apart and keep them there. And then, in 1975, a young Dutch researcher sat down to watch a colony of chimpanzees, expecting to see exactly that. He saw the opposite. He was at Burgers Zoo in Arnhem, watching two males who had just torn into each other, screaming, charging, hair on end. He expected them to keep their distance. Instead, within minutes, they came back toward each other. One held out a hand. They kissed. They embraced. Then they sat down together and groomed. Calm, deliberate, the way they did only with their closest allies. He almost didn't believe what he was seeing. So he and a colleague did what science does. They counted thousands of fights and what came after each one. And the pattern held. Former opponents sought each other out more often in the minutes after a fight than at almost any other time. Not less, more. When they published it, they gave the behavior a careful, deliberately unemotional name: reconciliation. They would not call it forgiveness. That word belonged to us, and they weren't ready to give it away. But they had just proven something that wasn't supposed to exist. Two animals with every reason to stay apart, choosing, again and again, to repair what the fight had broken. And once there was a name for it, and a way to measure it, people started looking. They found it almost everywhere they looked. There's an obvious objection. Maybe two chimpanzees making up after a fight is just politics. They live together. They can't actually leave. Of course they patch things up. It's easier than staying enemies. That's fair. Until you see how precisely they choose. In the 1990s, primatologist Marina Cords ran a series of experiments on long-tailed macaques. She found that reconciliation wasn't random, and it wasn't automatic. Two animals were far more likely to make peace after a fight if they actually needed each other, if they shared food, if they groomed each other, if they depended on one another to get through the day. The closer the bond, the faster the repair. Scientists called it the valuable relationships hypothesis. You don't bother fixing what you don't need. You work hardest to mend the bonds you can't afford to lose. Which is, if you think about it, exactly how it works in your own life. And it isn't only primates. Once researchers knew the pattern, reconciliation turned up in more than 30 species: spotted hyenas, dolphins, goats, wolves. In 2008, a study by Koels, Van Hout, and Nelissen documented it in domestic dogs, the same animal lying at your feet. After conflict, they too seek the other one out, make contact, bring the tension back down. Then there's the part that's harder to explain away: consolation. After a fight, a chimpanzee who wasn't even involved will go to the loser. They put an arm around them. They groom them. They sit close, not the winner making peace. A bystander, moved to comfort someone else's pain. De Waal argued this takes something close to empathy, the ability to see distress in another body and feel pulled to ease it. But here is where the honest science gets uncomfortable. Everything we have described is behavior. We can see the embrace. We can count the grooming. We can measure the cortisol, the stress hormone, falling in both animals at once when they reconcile. What we cannot see is whether anything inside ever lets go, because that is what forgiveness actually is, for us, not the handshake, the thing behind it, the moment the resentment stops running in the background. We don't know if a chimpanzee feels that. We don't know if the dog coming back to your knee has released anything at all, or is simply running an older, simpler program. This relationship is worth more than this injury. Repair it, and maybe those were never two different things. Maybe forgiveness was never the feeling underneath. Maybe it was always just the choice on top. To see why this matters so much, you have to see what happens when it fails. Go back to that same colony in Arnhem. The chimpanzees de Waal studied did not always make peace. In 1980, 3 of the colony's males were caught in a long struggle for power. Luit had taken the top position. The other 2, Nicky and Jeroen, wanted it back. One night, the 2 of them attacked Luit in his night cage. By morning, he was dying of his wounds. He had lost fingers and toes. De Waal would later write that the attack had been deliberate, calculated, almost political. The repair mechanism that held the whole group together had failed, and without it, the violence simply ran all the way to the end. That's the stakes. For a social animal, reconciliation isn't sentimental. It is the only thing standing between a disagreement and a death. Forgiveness, or whatever its animal ancestor is, exists because the alternative kills you. Now the other side of the same colony. Her name was Mama. For decades she was its matriarch, the one every other chimpanzee turned to, the one who brokered the peace after the males tore into each other. In the spring of 2016, Mama was dying. She was 59, frail, refusing food, curled in her nest. Jan van Hoof, the biologist who had known her for more than 40 years, came to say goodbye. An almost unthinkable thing to do with an adult chimpanzee, who could kill a man without effort. Watch what happens. When Mama recognizes his face, she screams, and the scream sounds like joy. She reaches up, she pulls him into an embrace, and then she pats him, gently, on the back of the head. The exact gesture chimpanzees use to reassure each other, to say it's all right, to say I'm not angry. In her last days, the old peacemaker is still doing the only thing she ever did, closing the distance. So why would evolution build any of this? Because for any animal that has to live beside the same individuals for years, the power to repair a bond is as vital as the power to win a fight. The psychologist Michael McCullough has argued that forgiveness is not a gift that civilization handed us. It is an instinct, evolved, sitting right next to the instinct for revenge, both of them tools for managing the ones you cannot escape. We did not invent forgiveness in churches and courtrooms. We inherited it from the same place the chimpanzee did. What we still can't do is the one thing we most want to. We can't get inside. We can measure the embrace, the falling cortisol, the bystander's arm around the loser. We cannot feel what the chimpanzee feels when it crosses the enclosure to make peace with the animal that just hurt it. We don't know if there is a release in there, or only a calculation. And the honest answer is that we may never know. But every time the chimpanzee crosses the floor, the dog comes back to your knee. Something with every reason to stay away decides the bond is worth more than the wound. You will do the same thing this week. Someone will hurt you, and some older part of you will start closing the distance before the rest of you has agreed to it. You'll call it a choice. You'll call it being the bigger person. It might just be the oldest instinct you have, doing the only thing it ever learned to do, keeping you beside the ones you can't survive without.